Previously on Shophie Recap, Renee was knee-deep in trouble, facing accusations that would make even the boldest villain sweat. But instead of running, she decided to stay and investigate, because apparently, she likes life on hard mode. Renee had been tasked with gaining someone's trust and proving her innocence. The girl wanted to stay and continue the investigation, but no, she was told to return. Meanwhile, the knights kept staring at her like she'd stolen their lunch money. Sadine and Iser headed to the Imperial Palace to dig up information. Renee, on the other hand, wished her mission was to assassinate someone rather than clear her name, the easier option. Just then, she heard a knock. From the voice alone, she knew it was Carol. When her brother entered, he looked both confused and slightly suspicious, like a man who walked in on a raccoon eating from his pantry. He asked what she was doing. Renee, lying there without a care, told him to spit it out. Carol explained that their father had dropped the charges against her. Great news, right? Wrong, apparently there were new charges now. Carol went on to say their family had been summoned to the capital. As Renee mulled over how much she disliked this idea, she noted Carol didn't even look that angry. He replied he was angry, just not anti-angry. Then he dropped a bomb. Auntie loves Leon. Renee nearly choked. Turns out Auntie had been nursing unrequited love for 10 years, and that's why she was furious. She wanted Renee to stop pestering Leon. Renee finally pieced it together. Sure, Auntie might be exaggerating, but calling her own niece a murderer? That's a bit much. Since the saint was engaged to the crown prince, Auntie couldn't touch her. But clearing her name? That was going to be the real challenge. Renee asked if Carol thought she had killed the saint. He said no. She reminded him the note said the saint suffered because of her. By that logic, Renee concluded she was the killer. Detective skills, questionable. Carol pointed out she'd been acting strangely and forgetting things. She argued that losing passion was natural when a person was gone. Carol said that was weird. She never once said she wanted to kill the saint. Renee, now suspicious, grabbed his shoulders. He confessed she hadn't sent any killers. Everyone just assumed she did. Why? Because she'd said so at the ball. Apparently, in a bid to look strong, Renee had claimed she could kill the saint, and everyone believed her. Again, questionable life choices. Carol teased that she wasn't smart enough to orchestrate an assassination. Renee hit him on the head. She blamed him for raising her wrong while knowing how she was treated. Still, she admitted they had to face this together. Not the best sibling relationship, but hey, better late than never. Hours later, in Duke Marcus's mansion in the capital, Renee found something surprising, a diary. It revealed the real Renee wasn't the killer and had actually been friends with Leon. The entries showed how Talia stirred trouble, Leon defended her, and yet everything spiraled into disaster. Renee slammed the diary shut, not understanding what the hell this was, because if it was true, then the situation looked different. Leon also knew that Renee had not tried to kill her. And what's more, they were each other's only close friends. The main character realized that Renee really was stupid, and she so wanted to believe that people were wrong when they called her a villain. And then she thought that maybe that was why she was here, because among all the people there was no one who could help. Renee wrote that her strength and Leon's strength would not be enough to stop this evil. On one of the pages, Renee was asking where to do Leon, and she asked someone to help them. Now the main character understands that if she sits with her hands folded, nothing will change. Now the girl had too little information about this world. But there were many ways to get information. And the most important thing is that Renee knows where to get it. But first, the girl had to complete a task where she had to increase her reputation by 500 in order to receive a book as a reward. After that, she handed Renee's diary to Carol and said that it was all true. If Carol doesn't believe her even after reading the diary, she's going to persuade him with her fists. Carol asked why she was only now telling about this, and then the girl asked if he would have believed her earlier. But then her brother replied that he wouldn't have believed her anyway. And Renee wondered if he had a conscience. Kir admits that he still doesn't fully believe in it, but he will try. But he asked Renee not to deceive him because he would not allow her to tarnish their family. Renee told him that he was not telling her something and he became indignant. To begin with, the girl asked her brother to calm down, deciding to give him a shoulder massage. And while she was doing this, she thanked him for believing her, at least now. The main character thought that if Carol had believed her earlier, everything would have turned out differently. She understands that it is difficult for Carol to believe her completely, and therefore she needs to arrange a banquet where she can prove her words. Carol said that only a father or brother could organize such a banquet. And Renee told him that he was also a member of the family. Without telling him everything, Kier replies that even Auntie won't find it that easy to do this. He says that his father doesn't like unnecessary expenses, so there has to be a special reason for such an event. But Renee asked for a banquet that would be attended by the heads of state and influential aristocrats. In other words, the event had to be attended by as many people as possible to hear her words. Then Renee decided to ask how special the event had to be for her father to agree. Kier says, for example, getting a high sword master. And when Renee asked what level he was, his brother answered that it was average. But unexpectedly, the girl asks Carol to admit that he doesn't like Auntie. She told him that she would teach Auntie a lesson and saw that her relationship with Carol increased by 10. Carol blushed and asked uncertainly how she was going to do this. The main character stood up and said that there was one way. Kier felt a chill run down his spine as if he had met the demon himself. Renee looks at him and says that if they teach Auntie a lesson, Kier will be able to reach the highest level of sword master. Some time passes and the next moment takes us to the banquet, which did take place. Some of the guests were arguing about something until one of the women interrupted them, asking them to look at the dancing people. When they looked closer, they saw that it was the Crown Prince and Lady Marzette dancing. The guests began to whisper that this was funny, and they seemed not to know what rumors were circulating in the capital. Others said that they might actually feel like they were the stars of the ball. To be precise, this banquet is held in honor of Mr. Marcy's achievements. Curel asked how he was able to become stronger in such a short time, and he was asked to ask his sister. The guests discussed why so many people had gathered there. But someone thought that the Crown Prince came here because he had also heard rumors. All this time, Sadine was watching them, but Carol asked him to stop looking at them like that. The guy smiled and asked if maybe Sadine had an interest in his sister. Sadine was immediately upset after these words. So, Carol told him that he was just joking. Sadine congratulated Carol on his level increase, and he told him that he achieved this thanks to Renee. When Sadine asked what he meant, Kier wondered if Renee hadn't told him. But before Carol could say anything, guests came running to him. Wanting to ask him about everything, they began to bombard Kier with questions. Although he asked them to wait and ask questions in turn. But since Carol was not ready for such a collapse, he decided to simply run away. Sadine, meanwhile, began to wonder if all the rumors were true. Even Sadine had never heard of such a way to become stronger in such a short time. The man wondered what could be going on in Renee's head, and he wanted her to share it with him. While he was lost in thought, Renee suddenly approached him and asked if he was enjoying the banquet. Sadine said that it seemed that rumors had spread very quickly since the most famous aristocrats had gathered there. He said that no matter what Renee says, she is already the center of attention here. But Renee's attention alone wasn't enough, because she knows there's someone here who has information. But in order to attract all eyes, Renee needed to put on a show. The main character understands that only this will allow her to shock everyone and raise Renee's reputation. Sadine was surprised and asked her what she was talking about. At that very moment, the Crown Prince approached the main character and put his arm around her shoulder. He says, everyone is asking where his beautiful partner has gone, but Renee has asked him to stop talking nonsense. Sadine smiled falsely and told Renee that she could go and that he would wait for her here. In the end, the girl agreed and told Sadine that she would return soon. Renee asked the Crown Prince to remove his hand, but he replied that it was all for their plan. At that moment, Sadine remembered the words of Renee, who told him to believe in fame and do everything that others do not like. At first, Sadina felt better after her words, but now everything is confused again. Looking at Renee, Sadine thought that he had never before regretted giving up the title so much. Renee, addressing the guests, thanks them for attending the banquet and asks them to raise their glasses to Kirill. Amidst all this noise, the girl felt their mockery, who had come to look at her out of curiosity. So Renee says she would now like to answer the question that is on everyone's mind. She said that it was she who helped Kirill Martz become stronger, and everyone was surprised. When one of the guests asked for more details, Renee asked why she had to do that. She asked whether it was possible to reveal one's secrets to everyone because the fewer people know, the more valuable the information is. In this world, such a level of swordmaster is something unbelievable. So Renee can't talk about it. Renee said she wasn't going to keep the information, but they had to pay for her secret. The atmosphere around her became noticeably tense, and the guests asked what she meant. All this time, someone was standing in the shadows and watching Renee from the side. But this someone finally comes out and asks what truth Renee Marcus wants to hear. Renee looks at her and realizes that she's caught the only person she needed. It turned out to be this same Talia who asks whether the concept of truth is too abstract. Renee didn't think that Talia would decide to come out of the shadows and show herself. The girl remembers how Sadine came up to her and asked her to show him something. Talia Crow is the one who made Renee a villain. Talia said that she didn't see any desire on Renee's part to share her secret. Renee asks if Talia is now trying to tarnish their family's reputation. Talia chuckled and said it was surprising that Renee would suddenly care about the family's reputation. Until now, the real Renee only suffered insults and humiliation. But now Renee is not like that. Renee says that what Talia says makes sense to her. But that truth can become a lie depending on who is listening. However, the girl is not going to change her mind because it is not interesting to share her secret. At that moment, while Talia was listening to her, she began to think that something was wrong here. One of the guests asked what truth matters, and Renee replied that the one she liked. Talia wonders if Renee Marcus was ever like this before. Then Renee said that she didn't like what Talia said, so they should put in a little effort. The guests began to whisper that Renee was not called the disgrace of the Marcus family. Some people suggest that Renee is lying again because she mocked the saint, bringing her to death. The Crown Prince asked everyone to calm down because all the guest statements seemed very rude to him. Talia apologizes to him because she didn't mean to hurt him, but she asks if the Crown Prince himself didn't suspect Renee. Talia says that it was Renee who killed the saint and that her suicide note could have been a setup. The guests adapt to her words, discussing how the past has not gone away. Someone agreed with Talia and said that people don't change that easily. They were just trying to find out ways to become stronger, but now they have changed their minds because of a few words. While Renee was thinking about this, the Crown Prince raised his hand, saying that he could not listen to this anymore. The Crown Prince states that the body that was discovered does not belong to Leon. The guests were shocked by what they heard, and someone asked if he really meant to say that everything was set up. Isher says that the court magician examined the body and found that the corpse had black hair. And he also reveals that the suicide note was fabricated to harm him and Renee. Renee adds that they haven't found the real culprit yet. But most likely this person is connected to Leon's kidnapping. The guests ask why he would do that since everyone loved Leon, and Renee says they don't know. At this point, Talia wanted to intervene in the conversation and say something about Renee again. And then the main character interrupts her, asking if she sent the hired killers to Lion. Talia was always the one who envied Lay and Karis. They were both the daughters of an earl, but only received the blessing of the gods. Among her peers, Talia was famous for her rare magical abilities. She had everything. So it is not surprising that she was always the subject of interest to those around her. But all these advantages disappeared with the advent of the saint. Talia hated Layan, who had more outstanding qualities, and her modest nature was perceived as arrogance. In Talia's eyes, the saint's behavior was empty and unnecessary, and the people did nothing but praise Leon for every little thing. Soon the engagement of the Crown Prince and the saint was announced. And then everything inside Tully simply turned upside down with anger. Talia was literally ready to do something against Lion. But she understood her position very well. Talia knew perfectly well what would happen to her if she laid a finger on Lion. And then Talia accidentally heard rumors about Renee Marcus that she was allegedly mocking the saint. To Talia, Renee was the perfect villain and perfection, but something was against it. In reality, Talia was just a coward pretending to be strong. Talia was furious that Renee, some stupid girl, was pretending to be an important person. At that moment, a murderer and a monster appeared, and there was a gift that was laced with poison. Talia decided that she would make fun of Lion and at the same time deal with Renee, that is, kill two birds with one stone. Already now in the present tense, Talia asks what kind of stupid statement this is since there is no evidence. But Renee told her that there was evidence, just not from her, but from other people. Renee asked Tali if she remembered the price of her secret to gain the highest level of Sword Master. This delight felt at the resistance of an opponent whom Talia underestimated is dedicated to her. It seemed as if Talia was on the verge of exploding with anger, but Renee doesn't understand why Talia is looking at her like she's some kind of pervert. The Crown Prince notes how bravely Renee attacks her opponent and that she has changed. When the Crown Prince first decided to help Renee, he didn't even think that she would do such a good job. A few days ago, Renee asked him to do whatever she said, and then she would make him emperor. Then the Crown Prince told her that he understood that she had become much wiser. But how could he trust her? Renee, snatching his sword from his pocket, said that he himself lost the argument. The main character swung her sword, deciding to strike with all her might. But in the end, she didn't have enough power, and the Crown Prince asked who she was, and Renee asked him not to be surprised and to answer the question. He said that he could get rid of the accusation himself, and that Renee was still not a reliable person for him. But the Crown Prince says that since he lost the argument, there is nothing to be done. And moreover, Renee has become a different person. Then His Highness told the girl that this time he would believe her. The Crown Prince learned of this in a letter from Lion, which she hid in a safe and which she was going to send to Renee. The main character wondered how valuable the letter was if Leon hid it in the safe. When the Crown Prince said that Leon had always tried to protect Renee, she asked how he could still doubt her. The Crown Prince responded that Renee should have shown herself more clearly, not killed Lion. Renee also decided not to trust the Crown Prince since he was also suspected of murder. Looking at his attitude towards herself, Renee began to doubt even more, so he must prove that he can be trusted. Renee herself knows that she said something stupid, so she wanted the Crown Prince to make his face simpler. The girl simply asked the Crown Prince to give her something as proof. His Highness replied that he had something in mind, but he could not give it to her yet. He sets a condition that they will cooperate, and then when he begins to trust her, he will show proof. And then the Crown Prince added that he in turn would do everything to make Renee trust him. Then they decided that Renee would help him take the throne, and the Crown Prince would help her. The Crown Prince was not quite willing to shake hands, but Renee said that was their deal. Finally, breathing a sigh of relief, they both shake hands and make a deal. It seemed that the truth was too difficult for Talia, so Renee decided to offer her easier terms. She asked Talia to bring evidence of the attempted murder of the saint, and it could be anyone else. This must be compelling evidence, and Renee will not forgive lying in order to find out a secret. She thought that if people started to suspect each other, then eventually someone would definitely confess. Talia said that she didn't understand what she was talking about, that Renee herself allegedly admitted that she sent the killer. Now, the main character understood what Talia was really up to. Realizing that there was no other way out, Renee decided to activate the Asmodeus mask skill, which allows her to change her appearance. The girl suddenly started crying, and she told Talia that it was all because she had threatened her. To say that Talia was shocked by what she saw would be an understatement. She nervously asks how she, the daughter of a duke, can threaten a lady. Renee says that this is possible because Talia knows all of Renee's weaknesses. Talia was so shocked that she could hardly speak, and she asked what she had done. Then the Archduke enters the conversation and says that Talia used his engagement as an excuse. And besides this, the man adds that she blackmailed Renee because he loves her. The people around froze from what they heard. Silence fell and Talia's eyes widened. Renee was surprised that the Crown Prince was quite good at pretending. Last night, the Crown Prince said he would help Renee clear her of guilt. But why should he confess his love to her? Renee asked in a rage that he really thought she liked it. Renee said she knew it could hurt her, but there was no other way out because there was no point in making excuses. For aristocrats for whom strength is the highest virtue, the method of earning the highest level of sword master will be more effective. Therefore, it is worth finding a different approach to people who are worried about the disappearance of the saint. For example, finding a new villain. The Crown Prince agreed with Renee's opinion, but said that involving third parties could be dangerous. But Renee said it was only risky if Talia was in love with him. If used correctly, false rumors can become an effective weapon. The Crown Prince asked if it meant they were going to play a couple in love, although she herself was disgusted by this. Renee said that was true, but it would be better than doing nothing at all. Talia began to say that everything was not so because as far as she knew, only Renee was in love with the Crown Prince. His Highness said that he had not previously recognized true love, and then his choice seemed right to him. The Crown Prince says he realized his feelings after he found himself with another woman. He says that now no one can shake his heart because now it belongs only to Renee. With her choice, Renee was trying to maintain the trust of Lion who is engaged to him. The Crown Prince says that he is the only one who did not remain faithful. It is all his fault. Renee thought that if he had been born in the past, he would have become a good actor. To be honest, the script was shoddy, but people believed in his amazing performance. All this time, the Crown Prince has been hiding his feelings for the sake of the Empire, but he has no intention of doing so here. He said he couldn't stand to see his beloved being accused any longer, and Renee thought she had run out of lines she had recorded. The Crown Prince tells Renee that he knows now is not the right time, and the girl tensed. The man says he can't wait any longer, and the main character is frightened by his gaze. Renee tried to tell him to shut up because it wasn't in their script. Irish puts a ring on her finger and asks if she will agree to give him another chance. Excited and tense, Renee couldn't refuse him in this situation, so she agreed. And so, the next action takes us into the coming night of that day. Renee sat outside drinking after everything that had happened, wondering what was wrong with this man. The demon said that they were not against such a relationship and that everything suited them. But Renee hoped to learn something from the book, because that was what it was all intended for. At this moment, Sadine unexpectedly approaches the bench and asks if he can sit down next to him. Renee hoped the conversation wouldn't drag on too long because she wasn't in the mood right now, and Sadine said he just wanted to ask something. The knight sits down carefully next to him, and Renee asks him what the question is. Sadine admits that it was he who found out what atrocities Talia was committing, and if Renee had reported this to society, she would not have had to ask the Crown Prince for help. After this, Sadine asks if he can find out why Renee made such a decision since Sad and was needed by Renee. She accepted him as a student, but she didn't think he would ask about it. She asked him if people would really believe it if she made it public. And she said that the most important thing here is Sadine's abilities, not hers. It would be better for Renee to resolve this situation herself than to sit and wait for Sadine to do everything for her. She asked him not to be upset because the evidence Satan found would also be useful. For starters, Renee is his teacher, so she has to handle her own affairs. Sadine, slightly embarrassed, asks if that is why she took such a step with the prince. Renee asked if he was talking about his relationship with Isher, and Sadine noted that they were already calling each other by name. Renee said that it was so, and sad and reminded her how she had told him that she would not love someone like the Crown Prince. She herself did not know that Iser would make a confession, and they agreed to tell everyone that they simply felt sympathy for each other. The girl says it would look weird if they did it impulsively. Sadine fell silent and then said that he would get used to it, and the girl asked what exactly Sighing the Night says that he must now get used to being around Renee. In fact, Sadine wanted Renee to use it every time she needed help. He no longer wants to experience the helplessness he felt at the banquet. Sadine wondered if Renee would be able to trust him if he became the person that was right for Renee. The next act takes us to the prince's palace, where Sadine asks the Crown Prince to give him the title of Maris. Sidine says that this is the position that was originally assigned to him. He tells the crown prince that if he cannot give him a title, he will ask for one from another empire. The crown prince said that he could not give the sword master to another, so he would give the title to Sidine. But since Sidine had previously refused this, he now has to complete one task. The crown prince was informed that some movement had been noticed on the northern borders. Sidine knows that the number of monsters is growing every day, and there are even more of them on the outskirts. Since the people from the temple are very cowardly, the crown prince wants Sidine to go with them and take a look. Then Sidine asks if the crown prince will give him a title when he completes the task, and he answers. In the end, Sidine said that he would go when everything was ready. Before Sidine leaves, the crown prince asks him if Renee is so important to him that he decided to take the title again. The knight asks what answer he wishes to hear, and the crown prince says an honest one. And at that moment, Sidine really wondered what Lady Renee meant to him. He is not even sure that he dares to talk about the significance of this man. Sidine replies that he doesn't know, but he is sure that Renee means more to him than to the crown prince. When Sidine left, the crown prince thought that he was becoming as impudent as Renee herself. But at that moment, when the office was plunged into silence, Irish himself wondered what Renee meant to him. After some time, the system sends Renee a new task, which was already in the second chapter. She realized that she could complete all the tasks only by agreeing to a romantic relationship with her lover. The demons began to talk and joke about the girl, but she got angry and asked them to shut up. Renee asked the evil ruler who would want to marry a man who was several years younger than her. The assignment was for Renee to protect Iser as if he was made the main character of a novel. While the demons were discussing something, Renee decided to block them so that they wouldn't chatter too much. The girl decided to take a rest because she had been doing all these tasks without a break. Almost everything written in the first chapter, she either already knew or experienced herself. In reality, Leon and Isher were not truly in love with each other, and Leon and Renee were friends. But there was also something unexpected, namely that Leon and Renee are both the main characters of this novel. And the second surprise was that our main character appeared in Renee's body. In the past world. There was no I because the main character lived in her own world. And that's why the girl doesn't understand why her character appeared in this world. But there was one more thing that had been bothering Renee for a very long time. It was Sidine who appeared almost at the very beginning of the novel and whom she considers one of the main characters. His name didn't appear in the book and Renee couldn't understand how that was possible with such a handsome appearance. But she wondered if Sidine might have appeared in the novel later, even though he was never mentioned anywhere. Then the girl wondered if she would be able to find the question when she read the second chapter. While she was thinking, Sidine knocked on the door and asked if he could come in. Renee asked what he wanted and Sidine guessed that he seemed to have come at the wrong time. But the girl replied that she was just a little tired, so she allowed him to come in. When Sidine enters the room, he notices Renee drinking bourbon straight from the bottle. In the end, the knight says that he came to tell her about the Cypress clan. The main character was surprised that the verdict came out faster than she thought. But Sidine corrected her and said that there was no trial because people from the temple intervened. Renee asked why this happened and Sidine replied that it was because Talia tried to kill the saint. Renee was outraged that they left alone at a dangerous moment and now they themselves are interfering. Sidine says that it turns out that this was a request from the saint herself. Renee thought that if Leon had wanted it, the criminal would have been sent to prison, but they were friends. Then Renee decided to ask Sidine what the temple ended up doing. He says that they were able to achieve a benefit for themselves and cancel the trial. They sent Talia to a monastery under the pretext of her young age, thereby presenting themselves as merciful. They told everyone that they kept the assassination attempt on the saint a secret at the request of the saint herself and also demonstrated their power to everyone. Renee said that they are real wolves in sheep's clothing, which is why she dislikes those who worship gods. Sidine takes a glass of bourbon and says that he found out which monastery Talia was sent to. He asks Renee if she is really okay since the temple didn't even apologize to her. But the girl thought that she didn't even have the right to punish Thalia because in reality the apology should not be made to her but to the real Renee. Sedin suddenly announced that he would not be able to come to her for some time because he had a lot to do. There was an awkward silence during which Renee asked if that was all. Then Sedin said that something strange was happening on the northern borders and he would have to go there. He says that traces of black magic were found there which sometimes manifest themselves. Renee almost fainted when she heard that there were witnesses who saw the image of the tower. Renee asked what the tower was and Sedin convinced her that she shouldn't worry, but Renee couldn't resist and shouted that there must definitely be a description of what the tower looks like. Then Sedin says that he heard that this tower is just tall and black. And then the main character tries to calmly say that she also needs to go to this tower. In fact, when Renee closes her eyes, she always remembers a black tower that soars upward, cutting through the clouds and the sky. She also remembers monsters hunting people and people running away like crazy. But the most terrible thing that the main character can remember is the victims of the tower. These victims were good people who offered their own bodies to save the lives of others. While Renee was lost in thought, Sedin asked her if everything was okay. Renee told him it was okay, thinking how cute he was for getting so worked up, even when he didn't know what was on her mind. Now Renee and Sedin have arrived at the northern border where the tower was spotted. The Wave Queen advised not to strain herself. But Renee wondered how she could not strain herself. The Crown Prince was with them all this time, and he was unhappy that Renee stroked Sedin's head, and she asked why he was starting to argue. The Crown Prince said that they could both disappear and Sedin replied that that would be strange. Suddenly, the Queen of the Waves notifies that she has found traces of the tower and Renee is surprised that it happened so quickly. She immediately started forward, moving further away before those in the yard had time to shout to her. As Renee ran, she felt energy, albeit not a little, but something was wrong. Renee senses more than just one type of energy. At first, it was the type she sensed in the tower. Sedin told her that the further they went in that direction, the more he felt dangerous energy. The Crown Prince began to question Sedin again because the latter accidentally touched Renee. The girl got tired of this, so she screamed sharply and asked them to get out of the way. Sedin noted that judging by the presence of divine power here, the people of the temple arrived here first. The main character didn't even notice this because her perception of divine power was completely dulled. Then the girl wondered what she should do because it was obvious that those people were hostile. But it seemed even more obvious to her that she should not take Sedin and the Crown Prince with her. She told them about the temple delegation in the other direction so that they would keep them busy and she had something to deal with. The Crown Prince began to complain that it was dangerous, but Renee told him that it was her business. Sedin said that it was important to him because the lady's business was also his business, but the girl refused. Renee explained that if they went with her, they would get on her nerves. The girl asked them to wait a little and told them that she would find them herself later. After this, Renee sat on the polar bear and moved a decent distance away from them. She activated the trap skill, which spreads magic like a dense net to pursue targets within range. Renee remembers that initially it was done with the help of a large number of people. But since the main character has a spirit, she had no problems with this. After that, Renee closed her eyes and concentrated, starting to look for what she needed. She noticed people who had divine powers and who were wary of them. Felt an evil energy. Renee went in one direction and then stopped. She looked straight ahead and saw that she was not imagining what was standing in front of her. The founder of the evil blood sect says the tower feels more dangerous and alien than before. The system asked Renee if she wanted to check the quest, and she wondered why it asked that every time. The additional quest stated that Renee needed to clear the 3rd floor of the tower. The demons began to talk among themselves, and the girl noticed that they were already agitated. The constellations are all powerful gods who are superior to humans and have special names. To publicize their existence, they lend their power to a contractor, or they watch and support the contractor as he achieves what he wants. Anonymous Constellation A says that his body was imprisoned 5,000 years ago and can be summoned. Anonymous Constellation B says that she is also worried about Renee and there is someone here who can hurt her. Anonymous Constellation C did not take part in the interview. How to draw up a to-do list. It says here that the constellations can personally descend from the heavens, and this will naturally drive them crazy. Renee didn't know what to do because if they wanted to do it so much, then she had to let them. Judging by the fact that there are no monsters around the tower, Renee should break through the passage inside. She swung her fist sharply and hit the wall of the tower with all her might. The girl runs inside and shouts to the constellations to finish this quickly, but Renee immediately stops when he notices that the inside of the tower is empty. Looking around, the main character noticed a strange slab. In the tower of her past life, she did not see a floor made only of tiles. It was a system notification that was shown to her at the very beginning when she found herself in this world. Renee was shocked because this system had not directly interfered for several hundred years. It notified her through the tower. It is unusual that the system left a notification in this way. But it is even more surprising that there are several such stone tablets. One of the signs said that there was a glitch in the system and they apologized for it. Another one said that the user should destroy this error. The thoroughly evil blood suggested that Renee needed to be patient a little longer and read some more. The system asked her to enjoy another version of the tower in a new genre, and they promised that there would be no errors. The sign thanked Renee for her trust and wished her a speedy passage. Then a notification popped up in the system that Renee had to go to the top floor of the tower. Renee finally got the epic quest she'd been waiting for, but she wasn't happy about it. She didn't want to believe that there wouldn't be any more mistakes because how could she trust someone who didn't even say how many floors there were in this tower? The Queen of Waves suggested that the girl first check what test was on the first floor. The constellations are connected to the main character, and they will gain freedom when she returns home. Renee thought that since the system guys told her they would help, perhaps the difficulty of the task was reduced. In the end, she decided that she would have to beat up a couple of monsters after all. The condition for passing the first floor was to select 3 male candidates for the main role and write their names on the table. Renee decided that now they would see what she could not get through. But in the end, Renee was deceived and she came back. Renee left the tower as soon as she saw the notification because she couldn't even describe one candidate, let alone 3. The moment the main character returned, Sadine and the Crown Prince simultaneously called her. The men approached the girl and began to bombard her with questions. Concerned about her condition, Renee was already scared to death of everything. And now these two were putting additional pressure on her. Renee wasn't sure she could choose the Crown Prince and Sadine as candidates for the tower mission. While Sadine and Iser bombarded her with questions about where she had been and what had happened, the girl didn't even listen to them. Sadine asked Renee not to disappear like that again and next time to tell him where she was. When the main character sat down, she said that it was time to take stock. Renee asked the Crown Prince why he was clinging to her, and he asked her if she really thought he liked it. But then the girl also turned to Satan and told him that she did not like excessive care. Sadine apologized to her if she was suddenly uncomfortable. But Renee replied that she was not so weak as to receive protection from others. She suddenly saw that sympathy level had increased, although she didn't understand why suddenly. Then Sadine decided to ask whether she didn't like the anxiety or he himself. He says that if it is anxiety, then he will correct himself. But if it is himself, then he cannot do anything. But Renee, slightly tense, repeated to him that she did not like excessive care. At that moment, the system notified that Sadine's sympathy level had increased by 100. Sadine was glad that it was not about him, but simply about excessive attention. At that moment, the girl thought that she had previously thought that Sadine looked like a puppy. But now, the main character sees this man as a real fox. The Crown Prince decides to ask Renee where she went. Renee replied that it had nothing to do with him, so he shouldn't worry. And then the main character asked Sadine if he would leave her and the Crown Prince for a second. When they were alone, Renee reminded Ishu that just a month ago, he had despised her. The girl's face became even more serious when she asked the Crown Prince why he gave her the ring. The main character saw in the novel how the Crown Prince really treated Renee. He told Renee that he wished she would stop because her feelings had nothing to do with him. Renee reminded Ishu that he had been cold towards her, but now he had suddenly become interested. They agreed to pretend that they had feelings for each other and that such a risk was not his style since he cared about his reputation. Renee asked him to say something and the Crown Prince replied that he had thought so too at first. He replied that he understood perfectly well that their relationship reflected on his reputation. The man also mentions that he had no desire to play a couple in love, but he doesn't know why, but it seemed to him that he had to do it. And the Crown Prince came to his senses only when he was putting the ring on Renee's finger. Isher also admits that Renee's words are true, that this time he really crossed the line. And so to begin with, the Crown Prince decided that he would be the first to take a step back. Renee noticed that the Crown Prince had become somewhat polite, which made her even uncomfortable. The Crown Prince suddenly announced that he would be the first to go to the capital, and Renee asked if everything would be okay. Before leaving, the Crown Prince turned around and told her that he was not supposed to be there in the first place. All this time, the Crown Prince treated Renee coldly because she could not help him take the throne. The man remembers how it was the same that day because that day was especially unlucky. The story takes us back to the past when Leon's initiation ball took place. Things were clearly going badly that day, but the Crown Prince had to be there. At some point, Isher heard Renee screaming that it was she who sent the assassins. Renee yelled at Leon and told her that her dirty pretense wouldn't work on her. The Crown Prince watching this wanted Leon to shut up Renee. The man knew that Leon could do this because she was the only saint of this empire. He suddenly remembers how his father yelled at him, asking how he dared argue with him. Isher then said that deploying an army on the border would only sow chaos in the country. At that moment, his father cut his face with his sword, reminding him, as he himself said, that the emperor's duty was to protect the empire. And then the man said that this meant that it was Isher's duty to protect him because he was the emperor. He tells him how he raised him with care because he was a talented swordsman but ended up like this. Then the father declares that Eden is much better then because at least he doesn't pretend. Remembering this moment, the Crown Prince approaches the screaming Renee and abruptly grabs her hand. As they walked down the hallway, Renee saw who exactly was dragging her and she felt uneasy. The Crown Prince was irritated by Renee, who did stupid things out of love, and by Leon, who could not fight back. The Crown Prince began to shout at Renee that he expected this from her, and then asked if she was tired of it. Renee sat down on her knees and replied in a hoarse voice that she knew she was an unbearable person, but she says that she was scared because His Highness also knows that there is no place for her anywhere. And then the Crown Prince realized that Leon was unable to answer Renee because she sympathized with her. He remembers that Leon sympathized with him in the same way. And then the Crown Prince thought how similar Renee was to him. At that moment, the Crown Prince told Renee that she had already disappointed him enough. If she was pretending to be grateful, then she shouldn't have dropped the mask. And if it breaks so easily, then she shouldn't have pretended to be so strong. Ishiro was overcome with disgust because in her broken soul, he saw his future. That is why he does not want to see Lady Marcus, telling her that he will not do anything to her. In the present tense, when Renee was already resting in bed, Sadine said that he also wanted to call him. When the girl asked what exactly, Sadine replied that he wanted to say her name. Leaning on her hand, the main character looked at the knight and said that he could do it. She told him he could do whatever he wanted. And then she remembered something. She remembered the moment when Sadine heard her already calling the Crown Prince by name. And while the main character was thinking, Sadine tensed up and asked what was going on. Renee tells him how Sadine himself told her that he would get used to her character, so she needs to make one thing clear. She recalls how she initially refused to become his teacher because in reality, she has a hard time establishing relationships with people. But despite this, she accepted Sadine because she liked him. Renee is afraid of people because you can get attached to them. And that's one of the things her life has taught her. People can die at any moment or their paths will diverge. And if you get used to them, it will only get worse. But in the end, the main character always became attached to those who were nearby. She became attached to those who came close, even if she pushed them away, to those who stayed close despite everything. But in the end, all these people left the main character and died. Therefore, The girl concluded that if you let someone deep into your heart, you will only get suffering. It will be difficult to shake off these thoughts even after returning to your homeworld. Renee says that when a person gets close to another, he begins to change his decisions since she had experienced this many times before. She just wanted to remain herself. Stroking Sadine on the head, the girl asked him if he understood what she was talking about, and Sadine replied that he understood her and would follow her no matter what kind of person she was. The knight said that he was her most diligent student, and his level of sympathy suddenly increased by 100. Renee smiled and agreed that Sadine was indeed a good student, but the girl did not understand at all why Sadine followed her so obediently, although they had not known each other for very long. Renee likes that he hangs around somewhere without any particular reason. And although he sometimes acts out, he comes back to her. But one way or another, the main character was still more accustomed to being alone. Renee wanted to continue to be in the relationship she was in with Sadine. Now, Renee didn't want Sadine to make her remember feelings she had long forgotten. Looking at the system, Renee wondered if she chose a love relationship, a coherent text would appear. That is why the girl chose the teacher-student relationship, keeping it in the system. The Lord of Temptation asked if she would regret it, to which Renee merely replied that she would see. The Lord of Temptation wants to give some advice, and Renee reminds him how many times she died because of this. Perhaps it is impossible to be reborn in this world, and there may only be one chance, although this is unusual. Renee decided to make Sadine the first character and Ashira the second, but she didn't know who to make the third. The Lord of Temptation raised his hand and said there was a good way, and Renee was puzzled. After that, the demons began to argue and Renee sighed heavily, asking him to say what he wanted, clearing his throat. The Lord of Temptation makes a brilliant proposal that he would become her candidate for the role of the third character. Renee looked at the chart wearily and saw that the first floor test had been passed. The demons were worried about Renee, but she told them that she was fine and there was no turning back. That's why the main character ordered them all to go watch the next task. The second floor task states that the main character's sympathy level must exceed 100. Because of these conditions of the task, Renee became furious, not understanding why exactly this was so. She thought that overall this task was easy and she would just choose one candidate at random. The demons suddenly tried to stop Renee, which made her even more angry, asking what was wrong. One of the demons asked her to remember her past relationships, and Renee said that they never happened. Then the girl thought that the demons were behaving this way only because she was not dating anyone. The main character was at the peak of anger, and she asked the demons if they thought it was too much. Renee told them that she just didn't want a relationship, thinking they were going too far. She can't even trust herself, so she needs to be smart. To begin with, Renee decided to return to the capital to meet with Sadine and the crown prince and check everything there. Before returning to the capital, Sadine said that he needed to stay here and finish some business. Renee could see the look on his face, literally asking her to take him with her. But Sadine assures her that this is indeed important. Because besides, the priests have not yet discovered anything. And it was obvious because Renee had hidden the tower with magic that even the archbishop probably wouldn't be able to find. The girl suggested that she also stay late with Sadine, but he said that it wasn't worth it. Then Renee stroked the knight's head, thinking that he would persuade her to stay, but Sadine said he was afraid that Renee would leave him if he insisted. Sighing, he says that unlike her false lovers, he is her true student. And then Sadine asked the main character to have fun only with him and not with that guy. The girl thought that if Sadine were a little less handsome, she would not follow his lead. She thought about his jet black hair and the green eyes hidden beneath it. And suddenly Renee realized that she had gotten too carried away, that her face was ready to crack from smiling. Time passed and Renee asked her brother Carol if she should teach him to speak beautifully. Carol was furious, telling Renee that he was tired of sorting out her affairs. He says that when Renee left, he started asking him about her secret method. Renee thought that even if they found out her secret, it would be difficult to use because this is the secret skill of the evil blood sect, the tempered sword, the blood limit. This secret skill requires you to endure terrible pain and train for several weeks. talent, and patience. Besides, if there is no malice in this person, an ordinary body will not withstand it. Carol asks where she was, and his sister starts to squeeze his cheeks, thinking that he was offended because she left him alone. Carol was indignant and asked where Renee learned to talk like an old granny. The demons asked not to treat Carol like a weakling. Deciding to get down to business, the girl asks if anything useful has emerged during this time. Carol hands Renee a notebook with notes, and she sees that they mostly just scolded Talia. This document is the truth that Renee asked for at the last party, the truth about the people who tried to kill Leon. Sighing, she says that there is nothing useful. And Carol asks what she wanted. Renee wanted to see not the tip of the iceberg, but the whole block, the one who arranged all this. Ultimately, she says that you can start with someone who did nothing but benefited. Kir said that there was no one who would benefit from something happening to Renee, but Renee corrected him, saying that he was talking about Leon and suggested that the target could have been in general. And the main character thought that she could immediately remember only one person. Both Renee and Carol said that it could be Princess Eden. Carol asked how she was going to reveal this, even if they suspected the princess. Smiling, the girl calmly replied that for this she needed to meet a person. All of Carol's terrible suspicions were confirmed when Renee suggested that he go to the palace. At the same time, Renee will see Ashar and test his sympathy for her mission. On the day of departure to the palace, Renee asked the Wave sister how things were going with the search for Lion. She asks this because she recently asked her sister to look for traces of Lion. Since she is the queen of waves and healing, she controls all water, and therefore she was skilled in tracking. As Renee expected, the Wave Queen was able to find the smallest traces left by Lion. This whole situation will be resolved if Lion comes back rather than sitting around and waiting for Ansadine to find her. It will be faster if the main character herself also takes up the search. Renee was surprised when the Wave Queen informed her that all traces of Lion had suddenly disappeared. The Wave Queen showed a map of the empire created from water, and Renee recognizes some places. While they were discussing this together, Kir knocked on her door and said that it was time to go. Renee furiously shouted at him to wait a little longer, thinking that with such a character, he would not have a relationship either. Even if Renee had obtained the constellation summoning skill, she would never summon the founder of the evil blood sect. Finally, after a short conversation with the demons, Renee comes outside and asks how long they've been waiting. Both Kirill and Auntie stared at her as if they were seeing her for the first time in their lives. Renee doesn't know what's going on in Auntie's head, but he also decided to join them and go to the palace. What was more important was that Renee had completed the quest and decided to check the condition of the windows. She looked at the status of Auntie's window, where all of his indicators and characteristics were visible. And then the girl checked Kor's window in exactly the same way, noting that they had made great progress, but she thought that most of the sympathy was gained because she was making fun of A. Renee invited the brothers into the carriage, but noticed that they were behaving strangely. Carol grinned and told Ray that this was the first time Auntie had seen her in such an outfit. Auntie asked him to shut up, very embarrassed, and Renee did not understand what they were talking about. Kir explained that before Renee dressed herself for the palace by hand, but now she is dressed rather modestly. Smiling, the girl replied that now she selects clothes, taking into account the place and circumstances. At first, Renee also did not understand why the real Renee wore such dresses. But now she began to guess. Kir noted that even Renee's facial expression changed, and the girl asked what was wrong. The brother replied that she didn't look at them as if she wanted to kill them, but simply smiled. And then the main character thought that they still didn't know that Renee was very beautiful and knew how to smile. The main character hoped that in the future Renee would be happy so that she could wear clothes that would be comfortable for her and the opportunity not to push away people she fears, but to smile among those who love her. After some time, we are transported to the moment when they arrived at the Ramdish Palace. Meeting Princess Eden turned out to be more difficult than Renee thought because the princess's side kept refusing to meet. Then Renee contacted Ishar, but all she received in response was a letter. Ishar wrote that he would give her everything she wanted, but it would take some time to decide on the meeting. But even after such an answer, Renee remained the one who never gives up. After all, the girl has a very powerful shield called connections. They enter the office and are met inside by their father, Duke Desir Marcy's. Renee smiled at him, asking if he had a good dinner, and the man asked in surprise what brought them here. The Duke reminds him that he entrusted Ae with the care of the house, and he immediately apologized to him. Renee didn't expect him to start scolding Ae, so she told the Duke that it was she who suggested coming. But putting his hands on her shoulders, the Duke says that Auntie did not keep an eye on her, and it is his mistake. Frowning, Renee replied that Auntie couldn't control her because she was an adult and didn't need to be watched. The Duke agreed with her, but said that she herself knew that she needed someone to look after her. Looking back at her worried brothers, Renee now understood everything. The problem turned out to be not in the upbringing of the children, but in the fact that the teacher was not very good. The Duke offers Renee some tea, but she asks him to get straight to the point. Smiling, the Duke says he wants to know the reason why she came at such a chaotic time. And then Renee asks what he's going to do about his lack of political instincts. The girl asks him if he heard that she and the crown prince are now lovers. Then she asked why her father was so slow-witted since she had somehow kept their family together. She tells how a conspiracy was hatched against the ducal house and the family did not help to drop the charges. In this situation, Renee says that she dropped the charges against herself and made peace with the crown prince. She not only put out the fire, but also created an entire lake on it, and she doesn't understand why her father still considers her a headache. Renee asked if all this was because she didn't consult her father and did everything herself. Before the Duke could answer, Renee said that she hoped he would understand her because she was the Duke's favorite daughter. Forcing a smile on his face, the father says that it was a mistake for them not to believe her. Renee also smiles falsely, thinking to herself what a slippery type this man is. Father asked me to inform him about such global decisions next time. Then Renee said that she would keep this in mind. And the brothers looked at her in horror, not understanding what she had in mind. Now that Renee knows that her father is the source of all the troubles in the family, she will have to take action. Renee was already tired of listening to her father's chatter. She wanted to meet the princess as soon as possible. And suddenly the man declares that although he hadn't said it before, he is proud of Renee due to various rumors in society. He was worried about his beloved daughter, whose face was worthy of attention. He tells Renee that if you look at it that way, she did an excellent job in her role. Father calls Renee much better than those who could not become a swordmaster even with the support of the family. And then the girl smiling says that this is strange because the father himself is not a master of the ball. But she says those who hear him will think that he became a sword master at the age of 3. When the man said that he shouldn't be compared to her, Renee asked why. He talks about how during the war he took on the care of his family, and then talks about how untalented his sons are. But Renee says that as far as she knows, in those days people, on the contrary, achieved greatness. Renee had a newfound respect for her father since he had achieved such heights and said that she really didn't know how to hold a sword. Time flew by too quickly. Renee hadn't seen her father for a long time, and she would like to spend more evenings with him. And then the girl finally asks if her father could arrange an audience for her with the princess. She says she just wanted to stop by because a lot has happened lately. And now the main character understood how all the Duke's residences could mock Renee. Renee couldn't even breathe easy in this residence, and it was all her father's fault. Before leaving, Renee said that she hoped that her father would rest well and sleep peacefully. The next act takes us to the Silver Eagle Palace, the residence of Princess Aiden. Renee stood in front of this palace and gnashed her teeth in anger. She dragged herself here a long time ago, but she is still waiting for when she will finally be allowed to enter inside. Just when her nerves were at their limit, she heard someone tell her that she could now come in. Finally, when the girl enters the room, she greets Princess Eden with a bow. Eden von Ramdish also greets the main character, telling her that they haven't seen each other for a long time. It was only when Renee was already inside the room that she realized that it wouldn't be that easy. She tells Eden that she wanted to tell her about a recently discovered clue related to Leon's disappearance. This time the task was limited in time, and this began to irritate Renee. Princess Aiden smiled kindly at her and invited her to sit down. Renee doesn't know what to do because she doesn't know how high Isher's sympathy is, and then she might fail the quest. Finally, when the girl sat down, the princess asked her what the clue was. Then Renee asks if Eden heard that Sedina was sent to the northern part of the empire. The princess heard that his brother had sent him there to accompany the temple delegation. Renee confirms her words and, taking out something, says that it came from Sedine. Inside were deer bones which were found in the body of the animal that ate him. Renee says Sedine picked them up because he sensed a strange aura. When Renee asked if Heidi knew what part of her body the bones belonged to, she replied that they were knees. The princess examines the bones and says that these are shattered knees, but there are no signs of injury visible to the naked eye. A powerful divine force connected the pieces of bones and restored them. It is rare in the world to find people who have the divine power to completely restore bones. Of course, the princess can only think of one person who has such power. Renee did some investigating just in case and found out that none of the priests had been in the area. When the girl said that this was proof, the princess on the contrary answered her that the proof was Renee herself. Eden reminds that Renee must be one of those who does not want the saint to return. But Renee, surprised by such a statement, said that she too was waiting for Lion's return. Eden said that even if they threw her out, it was unknown when Lion would return. Eden also says that the engagement of her brother and the saint is not just a marriage, but a secret agreement with the temple. While the princess was explaining all this, Renee told her that she already knew about it. Eden asked if Lion returned, Crown Prince would choose Renee over the imperial throne. Renee replied that perhaps this time it would not be the temple, but the Duchy of Marcus that would become His Highness's new power. Renee talks as if she got engaged to a share of her own free will, but she didn't want it. Because of this, the girl can't even hold a firm position. The princess smiled and asked if the Duchy of Marches would really become her brother's new power. At that moment, the door opened and a voice was heard saying how he was asked whether he would choose Renee or the imperial table. It turned out to be the crown prince who, turning to Aiden, said that if she was truly so curious, then he would answer. The princess continues to smile, not expecting her brother to pay a visit. The crown prince immediately said that he had no intention of abdicating the imperial throne. When Eden tells him that he heard it all himself, tells her that even so, he does not intend to sin against Renee. The princess assumed that he was passionately in love. And then she asks if the words he said at the banquet were really sincere. Taking Renee by the hand, the man turned to the princess and told her that it did not matter whether she believed him or not. But he asked her never to communicate with his beloved in this way again. After this, the crown prince apologized to his sister, and he and Renee left the palace. Renee told him that no one could see them now and he could let go of his hand. After she brushed him off, asked her to keep her nose in the air. Then the girl, stunned by such a request, asked him why exactly he was angry. The crown prince suggested that the lady seemed to be mistaken about something at the moment. He asks why Renee met with Eden, and she says she just wanted to find out something. And after that, Isher asks if she really thinks she is worth anything since he got a little closer to her. The demons began to whisper that they would like to see Sedan now. And Renee realized that they were angry, boldly looking up at the crown prince. The girl declares that he is doing this because he is afraid. He knows that Renee could leak all the information to the princess right now, which would reflect badly on his reputation. The crown prince knows that Renee has changed, but he tells her that it is not her duty to oppose the princess. He told her that all she had to do was fill Leon's empty seat while she was gone. When the emperor began to say that Renee should not interfere in the family's political affairs, the girl interrupted him. She asks him if Leon came back, would he throw her out, and if he considered her a mere replacement? The main character thought that the crown prince should at least respect Renee a little. Looking down, the crown prince said he didn't want to lie to her. At that moment, Renee realized that all this time she had been loving a man who did not love her. The main character cannot believe that Renee dreamed of eternal happiness with such a scoundrel. The girl's gaze darkened. She came closer to the crown prince and asked why she should remain on the sidelines for his sake. She tells him that she also has honor, feelings, and reason, but he apparently has neither. Even if Renee is hindering the Crown Prince's bright future, he has no right to treat her like this. Renee decided to leave. But the Crown Prince followed her, making excuses that this was not what he had in mind. Renee asked him not to worry because unfortunately she needed the relationship now and she was not going to break it off. She concluded that they would simply remain in the relationship they were in now. When the demons ask Renee if she is very angry, the girl answers that she seems to have become bad at judging people. The main character does not understand why Renee likes such a person and why for a moment she hoped for him. The Lord of Temptation offers to destroy the Crown Prince, but Renee says he has no right to speak. Renee is tired of meetings where she doesn't get answers, and it looks like she's thrown out another option for the evening. Suddenly, the princess catches up with the girl and says that she would like to apologize for what happened recently. Renee responded that she didn't have to do that and that she should accept her apology herself. The princess regretted doubting her relationship with her brother, saying that she should not have said all that. And so, Princess Aiden says she wants to make amends, asking if they can continue the conversation. Renee replies that she has said everything she wanted to. But since the princess has not yet said everything, she declares that Renee was deceived by her brother. And Eden says that if Renee stays in her palace, she will personally show her the evidence. The system announced that if Renee accepted the princess's offer, she would become her ally. Because of Renee was unable to talk to the princess properly. The Lord of Temptation asks Renee to at least once look at Isher's sympathy, and the girl thought that the mistake could have already been corrected. When she saw that the system was still being updated, she realized that she would have to make choices based only on her feelings. Finally, a confused Renee told the princess that she needed a minute to think. The princess has already heard about this, but tells Renee that she has changed a lot, saying that if Renee were the same, she would have refused immediately. And the main character realized that if the real Renee were here, she wouldn't even listen to the princess's proposal for the sake of Iser. The princess tells her that no matter what her brother promised her, it was all empty words. But Renee, unexpectedly for the princess, moves away from her and tells her that she refuses. The table reports that Eden's sympathy has dropped by 280. Deciding to ask why Renee made such a choice, Eden says that she made a very logical suggestion. Renee agrees that Isher is a fool, but he is also very calculating. Renee states that she promised herself that she would only trust her heart. The girl was not afraid that she might fail the quest because nothing would happen to her for it. In any case, since she didn't know the answer, she decided that she would only trust Renee. So, the next action takes us to the Marcus estate a few days later. Renee spent several days in deep thought because between Eden and Iser, she chose Sedine. Renee told the demons that they were both not her type, and even if Eden seemed capable, she was still suspicious. The girl knows very well what it is like to collaborate with a person whose inner being she does not understand. Besides, the main character is going to leave this place anyway. The stories of S-Class Hunter Kim E-young and current Renee begin differently. In her past life, it all started when her original body and soul ended up in a novel together, but now everything was different in that although the soul remained with Kim Yen, the body belonged to Reina. The transmigration in which the body and soul are connected means that one day the time will come for Renee to leave this body. And therefore, since the main character has borrowed someone else's body, she cannot behave as she pleases. She thought that suddenly someone would be found who could also move into her real body. She remembers her personal life that she passed her exams with difficulty, and it will be bad if the person who moved into her body does something. That's why she always feels guilty towards Renee because if a warrior had possessed her, she would have been able to complete all the quests. It's understandable that the environment will change, but she needs to respect Renee's feelings. Upon the return of the real Renee, she will again have to fight with Isher. And even though the main character does not regret that she cut off this unrequited love, Ishira's level of sympathy continues to confuse Renee's thoughts. She doesn't understand what kind of person would talk like that to someone she likes, but who has 157 points. Renee needed to complete the quest as soon as possible, but she didn't know whose sympathy she should test. At first, she thought that seeing Isher's face would help her make a decision. But in the end, things became even more confusing. The girl decided to leave everything as it was and that she needed to think about something else. Since the main quest is the most important thing right now, Renee decided to check her reputation. The reputation has reached -443, which means that she needs to return the same amount. But Renee was able to achieve this at least because the charges against her were dropped. But the influence of the name Ashira ends there. And now Renee must raise her own reputation. First, Renee needs to succeed in quests where reputation is given as a reward. Then she needs to resolve misunderstandings and erase the bad reputation of the past. And in the end, the main character must achieve an excellent result that everyone will recognize. She wondered what she should do because it would be difficult to use the original as in her past life. After her arrival, all major events happened as planned. In the original, Renee found the will, was placed under house arrest due to rumors, and the party where Renee denied her guilt was thrown by another aristocrat. Besides, the justification was so-so, and she's trust was gained with great difficulty. In her past life, the girl had fully experienced how much of an impact even a small discrepancy could have on the outcome. In her past life, she used the signs in the book to go through events in advance in order to avoid adversity. But this time, there are no events, no original. So Renee decided to follow only her own path. Sadine began to suffer from nightmares from the moment he became a sword master. Fear and anxiety continued to plague him, and it became common for him to wake up in a cold sweat. But last time, instead of a nightmare, he had a good dream in which he felt calm. And if so, then he had only had a similar experience once before. It happened on the day Sadine first met Renee. The girl greeted him, and Sadine asked in surprise what she was doing there. Renee told him that he could sleep some more, and that she would just watch over him. In fact, Renee had been watching Sadine sleep for quite some time now. A few hours ago, Renee realized that Sadina seemed to be having a nightmare. She noted that his complexion was not very good and that he did not wake up, although she came quite close. In the end, the girl decided that it would be better to wake him up than to leave this nightmare. And as soon as she touched him, she noticed that his complexion had improved. She realized that this was good and decided to leave him to sleep a little longer. And Renee had long ago noticed how handsome Sadine was when he slept. Black hair was common in the past life. And Sadine looks like a man from there. He was a man who simultaneously inspired homesickness and a sense of the unknown. Sadine became embarrassed, saying that it was not particularly interesting to watch him. Renee gently flicked him on the nose, saying that it was up to her to decide. Then Sadine asked if he could also watch her sleep, but Renee refused. Smiling, the knight asks what the purpose of Renee's visit is today. She said there was no goal, but Sadine replied that he knew that was not true. Renee thought about it and wondered out loud what would happen if she revealed that she was a sword master. But Sadine thinks that no one will believe this, because Renee became a disgrace to the family due to her inability to wield a sword. He reasons that Renee helped Kerr grow up, so it doesn't seem like a meaningless thing. When Sadine asked why she had decided to tell this story, Renee replied that she was tired of the way the aristocrats treated her. Sadine is sure that Renee will be treated lightly, and he can't help his regret. The knight says that if Renee reveals her true nature, she will be very busy. The girl asked if he was really upset about it because that's exactly what she would have felt. When Sadine asked her if she would be sad when she couldn't see him, she said yes. Renee thought it was natural for a person to feel sad about someone disappearing. One day, the main character gave up on the idea of climbing to the top of the tower. She didn't know what would be left of her after she had gone through the entire tower, having spent so much energy. The girl also didn't know how she would return to the original world because she didn't even remember the name of her family member. Then, the main character wondered if she really needed to go back home. When she lost her desire to live, she was ready to give up everything. But the system made her an offer that if she walked to the end of the tower, then all the people who died here would return to life. Then the girl compared these words to the old man because those words seemed like a real temptation of the devil. The main character accepted the offer, and although she regained hope, she stopped being sad about the death of her comrades. While the other survivors begged to stay there, she said it was time for them to go to the next floor. She said that the dead here will not be resurrected if they sit here like this and cry. People wondered if the commander was really human and if she would even shed tears if they died. The girl with tears in her eyes asks the commander if they are really comrades. Our heroine was shocked by what she heard because in her eyes everything looked wrong. But suddenly she realized that she could no longer treat her own life or the lives of her comrades as valuable. With the determination that the main character must pass the tower, she turned away from all this sadness. So now Renee wondered if she would really feel annoyed. Sadine puts his hand on the girl's face and asks if she's okay. The girl came to her senses and removed his hand, apologizing for being a little lost in thought. The knight asked if he had made her worry, and Renee asked where they were. Remembering that they talked about the swordmaster, Renee tells Sadine that this is exactly why she needs his help. Sadine agreed without any problems and asked how he could help her. Renee suggested that Sadine place a job posting, a very, very difficult one. But before that, Renee thought about what kind of reward she should give for completing the task. Sadine asked if he could name the reward himself, and Renee did not refuse him. He asked how Renee would feel if he said he was worried about her being attacked by bandits, and she replied that it was better to worry about their lives. Then the knight smiled and told her that he felt the same way now. Renee heard that Sadine went to investigate in the north because of the title of Marcus. Previously, Renee thought that Sadine didn't care. So, she asks what has changed. Sadine replied that he was irritated by aristocrats. But something appeared that began to irritate him even more. And when the girl asked who it was, he replied that it was the crown prince who was bragging next to Renee. Renee asked if he really cared that much, to which Sadine replied that he did care a lot. But the knight adds and clarifies that besides this, there is another reason. At this point, Sadine asked Renee if he could tell her about himself. Sadine was an orphan abandoned in the chaos of war, and in order to survive, he had to take up the sword. To get better equipment and a safe place to live, he began working as a mercenary. After the war ended, the mercenaries had nowhere to go, and Sadine began using them as informants. Although Sadina was tired of holding back the aristocrats who came to the guild, he was not so tired that he worried about it. And when Renee asked why he gave up the title, Sadine replied that it was all insignificant. Sadine lived for quite a long time without a goal, felt nothing, and was not attached to anyone. But when the knight got everything he wanted, he suddenly got tired of it all. That's why Sadine impulsively gave up the title at that moment. Sadine knew that many were surprised by this, and everyone wanted to know something secret, but he answered them that he was not interested in it. Sadine suggested that Renee probably thought he was living in luxury. Renee recognized herself in these words, that she was simply enduring and going with the flow. Sadine breathed a sigh of relief, because Renee understood him too. Sadine claims that after meeting Renee, the gear inside him that had been stopped suddenly started turning again. And now he is happy that everything he has accumulated during this time he can use for Renee. He says that when he finally gets what he has been denying, Renee can use it indefinitely. Eventually, several days pass from this moment and from their conversation. Suddenly, rumors began to circulate around the capital, and it all started on Tis Street. People were discussing the dragon about whom rumors were circulating, saying that he was mad. Rumors were like the seeds of ripe fruit. They were planted in the hearts of many people. Rumors said that some madman had awakened the dragon from its sleep. Rumors that were considered unfounded were soon SWN in the hearts of people like a spark thrown into a dry wheat field. Rumors began to spread uncontrollably, and new mouths began to appear in the place where the fire had taken place. After some time, the maid tells Sadine that she did what he asked. The story tells how the reaper presented his fruits to the person dearest to him. Still, Sadine created an ad that says they are looking for someone who can kill the dragon and bring its heart as proof. Renee was furious at this point because she now understood why Sadine himself decided to set the reward. At the border where the dragon was spotted, Sedan asked Renee if she was angry, but her expression was clear. Renee angrily asked the knight what he was thinking when he chose such a reward. Sedan said that no one but Renee could complete this quest anyway, but Renee replied that it was even worse because she did not use people as slaves. A couple of days ago, Sedan said that they had received a lot of funding, but the final expedition team included 3 people. He explained that at least one swordmaster was needed to fight. One of these people will be surprisingly Crown Prince Ishur, and the last person, as a smiling Sedan declared, will be his teacher. And when asked what kind of person the teacher is, Sedan replied that she is someone who is 1 level higher than a swordmaster. Renee says Sedan was just making a fuss about the secret of swordmaster, but Sedan asks if Renee wanted to tell him about it herself, and then the girl literally exploded through clenched teeth. She says that she should have said at first that she was just some anonymous person. Sedan frowned and said that he couldn't call her just someone because she was so valuable. Renee decided to tell Sedan in advance that she would not accept the award he had come up with. But to her surprise, Sedan easily agreed with her and asked her to do as she wanted. Since Sedan had been kind to Renee so far, she decided to refrain from arguing, so she told him to ask her next time. Sedan thought that Renee would refuse if he asked, but he thought that this method could achieve its goals. Thoughtfully, Renee asked if he really knew her that well. Sedan immediately began to apologize, thinking that he had somehow offended her and said that he only wanted to help. Eventually, Renee decided to let the situation slide and asked Sedan to be careful in the future. Sedan promised not to do that again because everything that Renee doesn't like, he doesn't like either. The girl was puzzled by the fact that Sedan was so kind to her because she did not understand why. One of the demons asked Renee to stop being so open about not having a relationship. When Renee asked Sedan if he made himself a reward to help her too, he replied that things were a little different here. He states that he wanted to tell everyone that he was with Renee. Deciding to change the subject, Renee asks about the quest, and Sedan says that her reputation is at stake. She asked thoughtfully if they had started with too big a quest. Sedan's expression immediately changed when he said that Ishur would join them later. Renee says he'll only show up when they're done, and Sedan adds that it's just his style. When she said she didn't understand how she liked Ashur, Sedan replied that it wasn't like that anymore, so it was okay. Sedan did not understand Renee's reaction, thinking that she had fallen in love with Ishura again. But Renee was quick to reply that this was not the case. The main character didn't want to get involved in all this, because she doesn't know Renee's true feelings. At that moment, while she was thinking, Ishur gently took her hand, saying that he had both shame and conscience. Coming closer to the girl, the knight quietly asks Renee why not him. Renee looks into his eyes and realizes that he has a talent for looking at others in such a way that it can even make them cry. Renee is literally weak before this look. She has no immunity against such a sincere look. Then Renee answered him that she knew that he was a talented man and that he had shame and conscience. She thought that therefore she too should have shame and conscience towards Satan. The main character understands that Sedan will still remain in this world and she will return to her home. When Renee apologized, Sedan smiled and asked what she was talking about. Renee is too kind to Sedan. She does not take responsibility for him and does not intend to stay in this world. After some time, the commander of the Silver Eagle Army under the leadership of Princess Aiden Arwen asked everyone to stop. Recently, the energy of the mountain has been not just unusual, but even alarming. Arwen couldn't believe that she was just a top-level sword expert. The princess was furious that the Crown Prince was included in the Mercenary King's team. If the Crown Prince had brought back Hao's heart, he would have become the next emperor without a doubt. Princess Aiden told Arvia that she couldn't just let this go. The princess promised that she would tie Ishur's hands and feet. No matter how many sword masters there are when faced with a dragon, no one will return unscathed. And so the princess ordered Arvia to kill everyone who was there. Arwen didn't want to attack the team, exhausted after the battle with the dragon for the sake of the throne. Since Arwen was delighted with the princess's determination, she swore eternal fidelity to her, but it would still be a cowardly act. Although fortunately, she would not have to kill the Crown Prince. At that moment, She heard a female voice greet her, and she turned around sharply. The people were afraid that the crown prince would go to a certain death if he wanted to kill the dragon. The crown prince only sighed heavily, unable to believe that these pathetic people have been holding him here for several days already. People say that the crown prince cannot be sent alone and that a detachment must be formed. While Ishur was lost in thought, Princess Aiden asked him what was amusing him so much. In response, the crown prince asked if she was really so unhappy that he was going to go without her. He told her that she did not care at all about the people shaking with fear because she was blinded by the throne. The crown prince mentioned that he knew that the captain of the Silver Eagle Knights had been missing for some time. And then he asked whether he himself should say what the absence of such an influential person meant. The princess replied to him that the question of the captain's location was an abuse of the crown prince's authority, but then asked if it wasn't an abuse of power when Eden decided where he should be. The princess told him that she had not yet expressed her opinion, and he asked her to do so. Princess Aiden declares that the crown prince must go there for the sake of the empire. People immediately panicked at what they heard and started making a fuss. But suddenly someone asked them to stop. It turned out to be Emperor Ashturvan Ramesh, who said it was obscene. The emperor also heard that the crown prince had sent an eagle to the dragon's habitat. Eden said that she had taken measures to protect the empire, but the emperor asked her not to deceive him. Although, on the other hand, if Aiden had stupidly sat there and done nothing, he would have been disappointed. Turning to he tells him that his actions lately have been quite interesting. But mentioning Renee and noting how impotent she was, the emperor asked Ashir if this was all he could find after the saint's disappearance. After a pause, the crown prince replies, slightly irritated that Renee is not someone to talk about like that. As soon as the emperor heard these words, he laughed loudly throughout the entire hall, grabbing the crown prince by the face. The emperor asked him to look into his eyes. Ishur began to get angry when his father asked him if he really wanted to take this throne. But then he says that the crown prince will have to prove that Renee Marcus is really worth something, or the throne will go to his sister Eden, who can't even pick up a sword. At that moment, suddenly remembered Renee's words where she tells him that she is not his instrument. At this point, when Arwen encountered Renee and Sadine, she asked them to identify themselves and who they were. Arwen thought it was Halen in disguise, but she had heard no word of anyone accompanying him. Renee asked if she really wanted to run her through with a sword, but Arwen insisted that she give her name. Then the main character decided to take off her hood. While Arwen thought that she had heard this voice somewhere before, Arwen was overcome with a slight shock when she saw that it was Renee who said that she had come to save her life. Renee asked her to put away her sword since she recognized her. To which Arwen replied that in this area it was difficult to tell whether a person was real or not. Turning to Satan, Renee told him that she liked Arwen because she was smart. Renee asked Arwen if she didn't know that she was shortening her life right now. Suddenly, the Queen of Waves and Healing reported that she noticed a brightly burning fire energy. Renee came to see who had so stupidly attracted Hallin's attention, and it was the knightly squad of Edan, who were not even capable of attacking a dragon. The girl told Arwen that she simply did not understand that this fierce dragon had gone mad. Renee thought that Arwen already knew this, but simply couldn't back down because of Aiden's orders. And then she thought that most of the knights in this world were blinded by loyalty. But anyway, Renee told Arwen that she was just very lucky. And all because before meeting the dragon, as Renee claims, she met her. Renee activates the saber strength skill, which causes the sword to not break or repair itself when damaged as long as there is water near it. The sword was so shiny that Renee couldn't use it in front of other people, so she activated the blood cult skill. The evil founder of the bloody cult is pleased and says that his martial art suits Reyna the most. The main character didn't expect that this world also had such technology. Sadine was delighted, but Arwen was shocked. Realizing that the girl was using magic, Arwen remembers being told that Renee was an ordinary person in her family. As a result, the main character decided to first greet the lizard, who kindly came to visit her. Flames appeared all around. Everything was engulfed in a fire that Renee hadn't smelled for a long time. At that moment, the dragon gave his voice, saying that he had smelled the scent of his kinsman. He talks angrily about how he was chasing a rat, but found something more interesting. A system notification states that Renee has encountered a constellation called Glimpse of the Past. And due to the indirect encounter, her reward has been reduced. She hears the dragon calling her a foreigner, banished from all worlds. And then speaking about Sedina, he calls him a boy who simultaneously exists and does not. Renee understood what the dragon said about her, but she didn't realize that he was talking about Sedina. But then it dawned on her when she remembered wondering why Sedina wasn't in the novel. Then the girl turning to the lizard asks him what she knows. When the dragon began to attack Renee, she immediately activated the chains that prevented the dragon from moving. The girl asked him irritably why he started attacking before she had finished speaking. The dragon replied that it was necessary to maintain the world balance. He tells Renee that she is not of this world, to which she replies that this is nonsense and starts attacking back. Sidin, who was standing to the side, felt that the dragon was also trying to get to him. The night began to fall due to a huge fiery explosion. Sidin tried to defend himself, but for some reason his body couldn't move. He became frightened, thinking that the dragon might have put a curse on him. But Sidin doesn't have time to do anything when he suddenly sees a bright blue light. The main character activated the skill of Dawn Waves and began to defend herself from the flames. Sidin looked up and saw that Renee was standing right in front of him trying to fight back. The dragon asked Renee why she was protecting Sidin and whether she didn't feel anything from him. At this point, the crippled Sidin tried to get up to help somehow, but Renee stopped him and asked him not to move. Sitting under the protective cover, the girl said in a commanding tone that she would quickly deal with the dragon and return. The evil founder of the bloody cult watches Renee with concern. The constellations were worried about Renee, but she promised them that everything would be fine because she knew what to do. Holland was the future leader of the Scarlet Dragons. He also has a glimmer of the flame of despair and pleasure. While Renee was attacking him, she remembered the constellation the system told her about. This meant that even if the dragon became a constellation in the future, it had such power now only if it is not the owner of the tower who brought the main character the most torment. The dragon begins to weaken, and he does not understand that Renee is using such power holding a sword to his eye. Renee said that if he didn't want to die, then let him tell her how he knew her. The dragon asked how he could not recognize such a fated soul. He also asked if the fact that her follower woke him up shouldn't change the course of events. Renee didn't understand why this should change her destiny. Be that as it may, the dragon asked Renee to get out of the alien world because this world is not strong enough to bear her existence. Angry, Renee told him that she didn't end up here because she wanted to, because she also wanted to get out of here. But the dragon was not sure of the sincerity of her words because Renee also obeys a great power. The dragon was hibernating, but because of Renee's presence, he was unable to sleep. And he is sure that he will only be able to sleep when Renee is gone. But the dragon says that there must be a way to get Renee out of this world since she herself wants it. The girl, guessing what he wants to say, asks if he really wants to take her with him. Renee asks him if he wanted to tell her something trivial like that he could keep an eye on her. Renee chuckled, pleased that she had hit the nail on the head. Then the dragon asked why she was hitting him. Because it hurt him. Finally, in the evening near the fire, Renee says that she decided to leave Holland. Sidine and Arwen couldn't believe that Renee decided to leave the fierce dragon. Renee turned to the man and asked him to introduce himself since he was now here with them. The dragon Holland did not want to reveal his name to insignificant creatures who had not lived even 100 years. Since they already call him Halen, they can continue. Although those who do not know their place do not dare to speak to him, Sidine doubts that this dragon is not crazy because once he deliberately killed innocent people, Holland was indignant and said in response that people simply do not notice their sins. Holland says that the little people think they can do a lot, and then Renee asked if that was really how he was able to see her true essence. She decided to ask about Sidine, what he meant when he said that he simultaneously exists and does not. Holland explained that Bloit did not create Sidine, and no matter what world he ended up in, he would not be welcome anywhere. He decided to give an example to make it clearer and said that it looked like the bug that Renee was talking about. Sidine expressed that this does not mean that dragons have the right to dispose of other people's lives. In response, Holland said that there was too much blood on Sidine's hands for him to say such a thing. The knight's face became more serious, and he asked if that was really why the dragon had attacked him back then. Renee asked them to stop arguing so that they would not look to the past and think only about the future. Sidine wanted to intervene, and Renee told him that if he wanted to kill Hallen, then she would kill him. She asked Sidine in a slightly rough voice to tell her that he wanted her to kill him. But Sidine only smiled in response and said that he would follow her will as before. Renee thanked him, and Helan was indignant that he had just almost lost his life. Renee reminded him that he had given up after one hit and said that she could hit him again to bring him to his senses. Holland sighed, wondering if this was the helplessness people felt when they saw him. The night Renee defeated the dragon Hallen, Arwen could not sleep. Her head was filled with all sorts of noise. All this time, Arwen thought that Renee Marcus was a disgrace to the family and that her values were completely shaken. But now it turns out that she is the teacher of the king of mercenaries, the slayer of a dragon, and the third master of the sword in the entire empire. The day all this becomes known about Renee, the crown prince's fiancé, will be the day of the princess's tragic fall. Arwen remembers Renee telling Sidine to tell her clearly that she must kill the dragon. Then the girl thought that if Renee was ready to kill the dragon, then it would be easy for her to deal with the princess. She was about to talk to Renee, but she put a barrier on the tent. Arwen couldn't just stand there and wait until she could meet the princess. Therefore, Arvi decided to turn to Sidine, asking him then what needed to be done to save the princess. And the knight answered her with an imperturbable face that she should ask Renee for mercy. But Arv understands that it is not so easy because it means that she will have to tell all the princess's plans. However, she was sure that this was almost the only way to save her mistress. The next morning, Renee woke up in a good mood and the weather was beautiful outside. Arwen couldn't sleep because of anxiety. Sidine because of Howen, and Holland because of Renee. Howen asked the main character how she could sleep peacefully after yesterday. Renee was well fed and the air was clean. So she fell asleep easily, and Han thought that he wouldn't be able to understand her anyway. Instead, the dragon decided to ask Renee what her plans were, what she would do, and where she would go. The girl hastened to shut him up because now it was impossible to talk about this so calmly. But Hallen asked her telepathically what she wanted to do. She hears the dragon declare that he is not afraid of anything. In the end, Renee finally decides to tell him what she plans to do next. Having conjured a chair for herself, the girl sits down and calls everyone to her, saying that she really does have a plan. She tells Renee that since she is here, she should take the dragon's body with her. A few days later, the Llama's triumphal arch was held in the capital of the Ramdish Empire. People looked at the dragon with burning eyes and discussed how Renee managed to catch it. They also argued about the fact that where there used to be mountains, there is now a flat surface. One woman heard that water suddenly poured from the sky and swept away everything that was there. Renee's reputation had improved by 100 and was currently ATIS 263. The Wave Queen apologizes for not being able to hold back her powers, but Renee says she has nothing to apologize for. She only blames the constellation of her grandfather, explaining to him that it was irresponsible. And Renee is also annoyed by the Crown Prince, who arrived later than everyone else and did nothing. Renee's battle is only getting more complicated. A mysterious swordsman, a hidden witness, and a Crown Prince with secrets of his own. Can she stay alive long enough to expose the truth?